joined by Andre Villa, who will be talking to you about information rights management in SharePoint. Remember to join in the conversation about today's webinar on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @EuropeanSP, and our hashtag is ESPC15. After the after the webinar, we will have questions. Type any questions you have for Andre in the question pane in the control panel. Some questions will be selected and answered at the end of the presentation. This webinar is being recorded, and you'll be notified by email when it is available. And now I'm going to pass over to our webinar presenter, Andre Vella. Hello, Andre.
Hello. Thank you, Declan. Let me just show my screen. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending this webinar. My name is Andre Valla, like Declan just said, and for the next 45 minutes or so, I'll be talking about information rights management in SharePoint. But before we start, let me just tell you something about myself. I'm a SharePoint Solutions Architect and the Office and SharePoint Team Leader at Create IT in Portugal. I've been working with SharePoint for the past 9 years on many different projects, large and small, from public websites to collaborative solutions. And these are my contacts in case you just need to reach out to me. In this webinar, I will try to answer the most common questions about information rights management, namely, what is it? Why do I need it? How does it work? How do I set it up? And how do I use it? After that, I will touch some topics that usually arise when talking about information rights management. And finally, I will finish with a few conclusions and some references. Information rights management is a fairly complex topic that uses a lot of acronyms. Just to make it easier to understand, here are some of the most common ones. AD stands for Active Directory, ADRMS stands for Active Directory Rights Management Services, Azure RMS stands for Azure Rights Management, which was previously known as Azure Active Directory Rights Management Services, or AADRMS. IRM stands for Information Rights Management, OWA, Office Web Apps, and RMS for Rights Management Server or Services, depending on the context where it's applied. Okay, so let's start by defining what information rights management is. It's not a single product or technology, but rather a set of technologies used to protect and control the usage of sensitive information in an organization. It uses encryption, identity, and authorization policies. The protection is embedded in the protected files, which means it works independently of the file location, and it works across multiple devices. These last two are actually its main selling points. One question that I hear a lot is, why would I need it? So let's look at the very simple scenario. You have a company, and there's a SharePoint server there that holds documents, and those documents have sensitive information. These documents are stored in the document library and protected by SharePoint permissions, like they usually are. Now, this is John. John is an employee of that company, and John has read permissions on that document library and on all the files that it contains. Now, let's look at the problem this presents. Since John has read permissions on the document library, he can download any document stored in it. He can also view its contents, and that's okay, because he is supposed to be able to do that since he has read permissions. However, John can also copy the document, and he can edit it, and he can print it. And remember, we're talking about sensitive information here. John can also send it to Jane, and Jane is a friend of his that works for another company. In short, our document is only protected while it rests in SharePoint. As soon as it leaves its security boundary, it's no longer protected because no protection information is included in the file. IRM is meant to solve this. So with IRM, John is still able to download the file and view its contents, and that's okay because we want him to do that. But with IRM, we can prevent it from being copied and edited and printed and sent to Jane. Or even if Jane gets hold of it, she won't be able to access its contents. Okay, let's get to the first demo. Let me show you the problem and the solution in action. Let me just change here to, okay. This is the machine of Tony Stark, and this is a website for his company in SharePoint Online, a tenant. And in this SharePoint website, among other things, there are two document libraries. One is called Documents, and it's a regular document library that holds unprotected documents. And the other one is called Protected, and it's an IRM-enabled document library. On both of them, Tony Stark has read permissions, which means he can view the contents of the files that are stored in them. Now let's start with the problem scenario. So if you use the hover panel on any of the documents of the unprotected library, you see that Office Online will try to display them on the preview, and it will succeed, and you can see the contents of the file on the hover panel. Also, if you click on the link for the document, you'll get it to be open on the Office web app that is associated with this document. And you see that you can view the contents, you can also print it, you can also download it, you can do a lot of stuff with the document. Now let's try and download it locally. Okay, let's save it. Let's save it here on this demo 1 folder. Done. Now let's open the folder. Let's edit the document. Okay, let's add a title here just to know that it's edited. My confidential presentation by Iron Man. Okay, just save it. Now, Tony Stark decides that he wants to share it with a colleague, and he sends the edited version to Clark Kent. So let's just send an email to Clark and attach the edited presentation here. Demo 1, my confidential presentation. Wait, sorry. And let's send it. Okay, so I've just sent an edited file from a document library that I was only allowed to read. And let's go to Clark Kent's machine. See if he gets, okay, he's supposed to be getting some email around here somewhere. Okay, here it is. So he got the email. Let's just get it here. Now, one thing, before I open it, Clark Kent has no read permissions on this document library. So he is not allowed to read any documents on that document library. However, he could receive the presentation sent by Tony Stark, and he can open it and even edit it and print it and do whatever he wants with it because it's unprotected. So this is the problem that IRM solves. Now let's see what happens if we do this with protected documents. So let's go back to Tony Stark's machine. Let's just go back to the site. So if you use the hover panel on any of the protected documents, you'll see that you don't get any preview. And that's because they are all protected with IRM. So if you click on any of the documents, let's just click this one, you see that Office web apps will open also. So the corrected web app will open the document in your browser. Actually, no, that's because, okay, just check something before I open this. Let's get to the configuration here for this document library. I'll show this in detail in a little bit. But right now I just wanted to demonstrate you how it works. So let's go back. So if Tony Stark tries to open the PowerPoint, well, it doesn't matter here anyway. Even if he opens it on the Office web app or on his, in this case, in the Office client application for PowerPoint, you see that he gets a yellow bar stating that this is confidential, it's protected, and he actually gets a button where he can see what permissions he has on this document specifically. So he can view it, he can edit it, but he cannot edit it or copy it or print it or save it or export it, or does not have any full control over it. And you can see that, for instance, you have all those buttons on Office will be grayed out, so they are disabled, and Tony Stark can't do anything with this document other than read what's in it. Okay, so let's try doing the same scenario. Let's close it. Let's download it. Okay, now let's save it in this same folder. Now, so this is the same. I can't edit it. I can't even click on it, so nothing happens. I can click it, but I cannot write anything on it. So anyway, let's assume that Tony Stark anyway wants to share this document, which is confidential, has some important information inside, with Clark Kent once again. So he will send a new email with the document he just downloaded. Demo 1, protected document. And let's attach it. Okay, now let's see if Clark Kent receives it. Okay, he did. Let's just open it. And when Clark Kent tries to open it, the client application warns that he has no permissions to access it. In this case, Clark Kent actually has read permissions on the protected document library, but the document was downloaded by Tony Stark. Hence, Clark Kent is not allowed access to it. Let's go back to the slides so that we can continue explaining how this works. What have we just seen? So we experienced the problem we're trying to solve, and then I showed you how to solve it using IRM. We also saw IRM support in Office Online and Office client applications. Now let's talk about how it works. In SharePoint, IRM protection is applied to files stored in document libraries and to files attached to list items. You cannot protect list items themselves with IRM. Protection is applied by a component called IRM Protector according to the file type. This means you need to have an IRM Protector installed for each of the file types you want to protect. Out of the box, SharePoint includes protectors for Office file formats, Office OpenXML formats, PDF, and XPS. Regarding content creation, here's what happens. In a typical IRM setup, you have the SharePoint form, and you need an RMS to handle the rights management workload. A user uploads a regular and protected document to a SharePoint document library. And that's it. Nothing else happens. Even in IRM protected document libraries, documents are not protected or encrypted when stored. This allows the search service from SharePoint to crawl the contents of the documents. And this might seem like a security problem, but in fact it isn't. SharePoint Search performs security trimming when presenting search results, which means that a user only sees the search results he has permissions to see, so you don't really have to encrypt the files for this. Also, if you're worried that anyone could access the content database, so if a user can access the content database directly, they have a service account or administrative account, in which case he would have access to all documents anyway through the SharePoint UI. So it's actually a non-issue. So this is why SharePoint does not protect documents when they're stored in the content database. So a slightly different scenario. There's the same setup for IRM, but now the user uploads a protected document to an IRM-enabled document library in SharePoint. So in this case, the issuance license, which is included in the protected document, is validated with the help of the RMS. Once validated, the document, SharePoint decrypts the file contents and checks if the document library ID contained in the issuance license is valid. If so, the document is then stored unprotected. One takeaway here: when protecting or unprotecting files with IRM, the file contents are never sent to RMS. Encryption and decryption is always performed by the IRM-enabled application, in this case, SharePoint. So what about when a user is consuming protected content? We start with the same setup. The user requests a protected document from an IRM document library. And with the help of RMS, a new issuance license is generated, which includes a document-specific key, which will be used to encrypt its contents, a list of users that can access the contents, and by default contains only SharePoint and the user which is requesting the document, and the document library ID. This is why, in the previous demo, Clark Kent was unable to access the protected document sent by Tony Stark. Although Clark has read permissions on the document library, when the file is protected, only the user requesting it, in this case Tony Stark and SharePoint, are included in the access control list. The file is then protected by SharePoint and sent back to the user. So the key takeaways here are: protection is applied on download every time a user requests a file from an IRM-enabled document library. And by default, the protected document is accessible only to the user that requested it. When protecting a file, SharePoint will check what are the user's permissions for that file in SharePoint, and will map them to IRM-specific rights, which will then be embedded in the protected document. This is the matrix, the mapping matrix used by SharePoint. A user with managed permissions or a managed website will have full control over the document. This means unrestricted access, much like if there was no protection at all, though the file will be encrypted. A user with edit items, manage lists, or add and customize pages will be mapped to a content editor with read, edit, copy, and save rights. Print rights, however, have to be explicitly configured in the rights policy. Otherwise, the user will not be able to print it. A user with view items permission will be mapped to a content reader with only read rights. Any other permission on SharePoint will not be mapped to any rights on the IRM side. So here's the list of capabilities that IRM brings to the table. You can prevent an authorized viewer, that is someone with read permissions on that document, from copying, modifying, printing, copying and pasting, and using print screen on Windows on a protected document. You can also prevent an unauthorized viewer, that is someone who has no permissions at all, from accessing the document contents, even if the document is sent via email after being downloaded from the server. And you can restrict access to specific periods of time, after which users must revalidate their identity or even having to re-download the document. Unfortunately, IRM also has its own shortcomings, such as you cannot prevent users from taking pictures of a document library that is displayed on the screen, so using a digital camera or something like that. You can also not prevent a user from manually copying the content word by word and typing it into another document. You cannot prevent screen capture through the use of third-party software, or a document from being deleted or manipulated by a virus or other malicious software. Also, a limitation that currently exists is that external users, which are authenticated via Live ID on SharePoint Online, cannot open IRM-protected documents in client applications. However, they can access them in Office Online. Now that you know what IRM is, why do you need it, and how it works, let's talk about how you can set it up. IRM can be used in SharePoint's server on premises and in SharePoint Online in Office 365. However, they rely on different RMS products. When deploying IRM in SharePoint Online, you must use Azure Rights Management. When deploying IRM in SharePoint Server, you can choose between Azure RMS and Active Directory RMS. Azure Rights Management is basically AD RMS in the cloud. Both components are very similar and work mostly the same way, but there are a few differences. For instance, let me just go through it quickly. Azure RMS supports both on-premises and cloud scenarios, but AD RMS only supports on-premises scenarios. If you need to establish trust between two organizations or users within an organization in order to share protected documents between them, both support this, but with a few differences. In Azure RMS, trust is implicit if both parties are using Office 365, Azure RMS, or RMS for individuals. In Active Directory RMS, trust must be explicitly configured using trusted user domains or ADFS. Azure RMS includes two default rights policy templates, and AD RMS includes none. However, on both of them, you can create your own templates. Azure RMS requires Office 2010 or later and Windows 7 or later, and Office 2011 for Mac is not supported, at least not at the moment. AD RMS supports Office 2007 and later, Office 2011 for Mac, and Windows Vista or later. Azure RMS uses cryptographic mode 2, and AD RMS uses by default mode 1, but you can configure it to use mode 2. So unless you need to support previous versions of Office or Windows, I would say that Azure RMS is the way to go. For that reason, and to keep demos short, I will focus on setting up IRM with Azure RMS. So the requirements to use Azure RMS with SharePoint, either online or on-premises, you need to have a cloud subscription for RMS, an Azure AD directory, client devices and applications that support RMS, and of course internet connectivity to connect to Azure RMS. As for the cloud subscription that includes RMS, you need to have one of these. Either you have Office 365, and for that you need an Enterprise E3 or E4 or academic or government equivalents, or you need an Azure RMS standalone subscription or Enterprise Mobility Suite subscription or RMS for individual subscriptions. But this last one is only for consumption of IRM protected files by users whose companies do not have an IRM infrastructure. So you have to share a protected document with someone outside your organization, that someone will need an RMS for individual. This table summarizes the devices and applications that currently support IRM through either AD RMS or Azure RMS. In the slide footer, there is a link to TechNet page with this information, which will probably be updated by Microsoft as additional applications start supporting RMS. I won't go through every combination detail, but let me just highlight a few important ones. So you can see that all major platforms support IRM, from Android, iOS, Android, Mac, BlackBerry. You can also see that protected PDFs are not supported by Adobe Reader. They require different readers such as Foxit Reader. To use IRM with Office documents, you just need to have Office, either online or client, depending on the platform that you're trying to open the document from. And for generic protection, you can use the RMS sharing app, which allows the protection of any file type. Okay, so this second demo, I'll show you how to set up IRM in SharePoint Online. It requires two simple steps for which you need to be a tenant administrator. Let me just get here. So the first step would be to activate IRM in Office 365. And once you're in this tenant administration portal, on the left navigation menu, you can expand the service settings and then click on Rights Management. In this screen, just click Manage, and notice that you're redirected to a page on the Azure Active Directory Management portal where you can activate or deactivate rights management for this directory and configure advanced features. In this case, rights management is already activated, which means I won't need to do anything. If it's not activated, you just need to press the Activate button, which would be here on this place, and that would be it. Now the second step is to activate IRM in SharePoint Online. So and for that, you need to go to your SharePoint Online administration portal, and on your left navigation, you click on Settings. Then you scroll down. In this case, you don't need to scroll too much, to this section that says Information Rights Management. And then you have to select this first option that says use the IRM service specified in your configuration, and then you have to click the refresh IRM settings. This might, you might have to do this on 2 different steps, so you might have to first select this and click OK, and then a few minutes later come here and refresh the IRM settings so that SharePoint starts supporting all the configurations for IRM. So afterwards, just click OK, and that's about it. So that's it. There's no other configurations to have SharePoint support IRM in SharePoint Online. Let's go back to the slides. So just summarize what we've just seen. To activate IRM in SharePoint Online, assuming that you have an enterprise E3 or E4 subscription or one of its academic or government equivalents, requires only 2 steps. You first activate rights management in the Office 365 tenant, and then you activate rights management in SharePoint Online. So the final question that remains to be answered is, how do I use it? In SharePoint, IRM is always configured on the document library or list level. This means that you have to start at the library settings page. If you have IRM set up in your SharePoint tenant or forum, you'll see an information rights management option in the permissions and management group. Okay. If you click it, you can configure the IRM for the document library, and you have 3 groups of settings. You have the IRM library settings, the document access rights, and the group protection and credentials interval. I will go into some detail about each one right now. So in the IRM library settings group, you have 3 settings. The first one prevents users from uploading documents which do not support IRM. In practice, this means but the file types for which there are no protectors installed, or file types that SharePoint cannot decrypt, or files that were IRM protected in another program that was not SharePoint. The second option allows you to remove the IRM restrictions after a specific date. And the third option prevents users from opening documents in the browser, forcing the users to download them and open them in IRM enlightened applications. This option applies to Office documents that can be opened in Office Web Apps. And you've seen in the first demo that Office Web Apps have IRM support, so why would I want to prevent users from opening documents in Office Web Apps? When opening a document in your browser, you cannot prevent the user from making screenshots, since the client application, in this case the browser, is not IRM enabled. In other words, the browser does not know anything about IRM. So if preventing screen captures is paramount, you should enable this option, since that will force users to use the Office client applications, which can prevent screen captures. The second group is document access rights, which contains 4 settings. The first one will allow users to print documents stored in the document library, even if their permissions, the permission level will not allow it by default. For instance, if you only read it and you enable this setting, then you will also be able to print it. Remember that by default, only the users with full control rights have permission to print. The second option allows users to run macros and screen readers on documents. The third option allows users to make local copies of the documents which won't be protected by IRM, so they can edit and eventually do what they want with a document, with a copy of the document, but not the original one. And the fourth and final option allows you to specify a number of days after which the documents expire and cannot be accessed anymore. The users will have to download the document again to be able to access its contents. The last group is dedicated to group protection and credentials interval and contains only two settings. The first option sets a period of days in which the acquired license remains valid. After that period expires, the user must revalidate its credentials to acquire a new license from RMS. As you've seen in the first demo, when you download a protected document, the embedded license only gives access to the user that requested the document. In a collaborative environment where multiple users are working on a single document, that limitation can harm productivity by forcing every user to always download his own version of the document from SharePoint. So this second option allows you to specify an Active Directory security group so that its members are able to share protected documents without needing to download them directly from SharePoint. So in this demo, I will try to show you three things: how to configure IRM in the document library and what happens when you change it, using group protection, and also how to use protected PDF files. So let's change to my browser. And you have here the document library settings for the protected document library. And let's click on Information Rights Management. You've seen this screen before. So you can see that it's enabled because it's checked on this restrict permissions on this library on download. And you have you can give the policy a name and a description, which is shown inside the client applications. And now you have the permissions here. So if you just keep it as it is, so if I just click OK, and we go to Tony Stark's machine, and we get to this document library, and we try to, let's see if it's already okay. You can see that PowerPoint Online is already able to show the preview of the document, although he will show you the message saying that he cannot show you because it's protected by IRM. But if you click on it, you'll get to open the Office web app for PowerPoint Online, which also has the yellow bar here and is preventing it to be printed. It allows you to download it and allows you to open it in PowerPoint, but nothing else. So let's go back a bit. And now let's go to again to the document library settings. I have to do it on my browser. Let's open it. Let's change the configuration for IRM on this library. Let's prevent it from opening in the browser, and let's allow users to print it. Okay. Now let's go back here to Tony Stark's machine, and let's click, and you can see that PowerPoint Online did not open the file because of the first configuration. Okay, so that's the effect of the first setting we changed. Now, if we look at the permissions, you can see that print is now on yes. He has permissions to print because I changed it. So this works as configured. So what about the documents that we downloaded before for demo 1 that had a different policy applied? Will it be updated after I change the configuration in the document library? And the answer is no. The protection is embedded in the file when it's downloaded. If we change the policy after the download, it won't be updated on the downloaded document. This is actually a use case for that setting that allows protected documents to expire after a specified number of days. That will force the users to re-download the document, which will have the new version of the policy. Now let's close this. Let's go back to, okay. Now let's make another change. Okay, let's remove the print, and let's do something else. Let's add here group protection. So there is a group that I have here which is called test users, and this group includes both Tony Stark and Clark Kent. This means that if Tony Stark downloads a protected document and sends it to Clark Kent, he should be able to access its contents without having to download the document directly from SharePoint Online. So let's try it. Let's reload this. Let's re-download this document. Okay. Download a copy. Let's save it in demo 3. Okay. Now I cannot edit it because I can only view it, so it doesn't matter if I open it or not. But I can try and send it to Clark and see if he can open it. So Clark, demo 3. Okay. Let's call it group protection. And let's send it. Okay. Now, let's go to Clark's machine. There it is. And let's, not this folder, let's go to demo 3 folder, place it here, and let's try opening it. So Clark Kent should be able to open the file since he's on the same group. And he can. And you can see that if you view his permissions, you can view it only because that's the only permission that we allowed on the document library. But he can actually access the contents of the file, whereas before he could not because it was downloaded by Tony Stark and only Tony Stark could open the file. Okay, so regarding protected PDFs, there is a protected PDF here, and this is Clark Kent's machine. Let's try and open the PDF with Clark Kent's machine. Clark Kent does not have one of those special PDF readers installed. Instead, he has Adobe Reader. Okay, so opening. Okay, you can see that this is what a person that does not have a compatible PDF reader can see when it opens a protected PDF file. It will still open, but you will just see this message. So this is the limitation of using protected PDFs. But if you go to Tony Stark's machine, Tony Stark does have Foxit Reader installed. So let's try and open it, the same file, using a Foxit PDF Reader. So you can see that it opens with the contents of the file. It has this watermark here because this is a trial version. Since Foxit Reader with support for RMS has a license, you have to pay for it. It's not free. You can also view the permissions here, like you would be able to on any other client application for RMS. And you have the yellow bar stating that it's confidential and with the description of the protection policy. Okay, so let's go back to the slides. Now let me see how much time do we still have. Okay, not much, but I think we can browse through some of this. So although this webinar's main focus is on information rights management in SharePoint, there are a few related topics that are important for those using IRM or looking into it. I'll discuss 2 of these topics here, one if we don't have the time for the second one. So the first one is the RMS sharing app. I've mentioned in a couple of times that in this presentation when I was discussing the platform and applications that have IRM support. And this is an RMS Enlightened client application that is able to protect any type of file and is available for all major desktop and mobile platforms. So you can install it on all of these. It connects to the RMS in your organization, being it ADRMS or Azure RMS, and is able to encrypt and decrypt files and enforce usage policies so that they can be safely shared with specific people. Let me show you how it works. Let's go to Tony Stark's, or maybe not. Let's go to Clark Kent's machine. And Clark Kent, let's see, what can we share here? Guess we can show something from around here. Let's share I don't know, small one from here. This one is okay. Okay, let's just put it here. Files, demo 4. So we have this image here. Okay, so it's a JPEG file, so it's none of the usual protectable files, supportable files. So let's just call it another sample image. And now, let's say Clark wants to share this with Tony Stark and wants it to be protected. So he can go here, and you see that there are these two icons, new icons here, which are embedded. In your file system, in your file explorer actually. And the first one allows you to protect in place this document using one of the two templates provided by Azure RMS, or you can define your own custom permissions, or you can remove permission and decrypt the file, or you can just share protected, which is the same thing, but it's a custom protection, and you just can type the person that you want to send it to. So Tony Stark. Now I want Tony to be able to view it only. So you can see, you can be a viewer, a reviewer, co-author, and co-owner, and that's the rights that you will be giving to this user when you protect the file. You can also ask to be sent an email when somebody opens the document, and you just click send. So it's currently protecting the file, and it's now opening here. You can see that the file that was attached to the email is a PJPEG or protected JPEG. So it's encrypted, and you can send it to Tony Stark. So let's send it. Now let's go back to Tony's machine and see if he gets it. Okay, here it is, sample image. Let's get to my demo 4 folder. Let's put the image here just so I can show you something. So we have a protected JPEG here. If you double click it, you can see it's opening. It's opened on the viewer, and this viewer is from the RMS sharing app. You can see the icon here. This is not the regular Windows image viewer. You're actually seeing the contents of the encrypted file. So if you try and decrypt it using the tool, remove protection, you'll see that you don't have permissions for this, because Clark just sent you the protected file, and he didn't give you permissions to unprotect it. So you cannot unprotect, you have to use it protected, but you can open it using the viewer included by the rights management sharing app. Okay, so let's go back. Let's see if we still have time for this. I think so. Yeah, I won't do the demo, just browse through it. So RMS logs. Currently, recurrently shows up in any security-related discussion is how can we audit the usage of protected documents. So RMS logs can be used for auditing purposes, since they contain information about all RMS operations on each protected file. In Azure RMS, logging is not enabled by default, and to be able to use it, you'll need an IT Manage RMS subscription. So you cannot use RMS for individuals for this, which is kind of obvious. You need to have the RMS server on your side or on your subscription. You need an Azure subscription because you need an Azure storage to store the logs. And you also need Windows PowerShell for rights management to perform all the configurations. So about the Azure RMS logs, they are stored in an Azure storage account as blobs in W3C extended log format, which is a standard format you can process with tools like the log parser from Microsoft. It can take around 15 minutes for a log message to appear, so it does not work in real time. It's near real time, but not real time. It's advised that you download the log files and work with local copies of the files. To do so, you must use PowerShell or build an application that uses the Azure Storage SDK. And each log message includes, among the information, the date and time of the request, the request type, request made to the RMS APIs, stuff like if it's acquiring a license or some other request types that are used to, against the RMS. The user ID, the content ID, the correlation ID, which is used to map to request the requests to the ULS log. Some client application information similar to the user agent strings in browsers, so which client application was making the requests and some other information, and the client IP address. So this can be pretty useful to audit the access on sensitive files. So I'm going to skip this demo because we don't have the time for it now. We have just to wrap this up. So here are some of the conclusions or takeaways regarding IRM. So if you have to take something from this webinar, it's the contents of this next slide. So first, IRM is a great way to protect sensitive information stored in SharePoint. You can use it with SharePoint Server or SharePoint Online. And its main selling point is that protection is embedded in the document and travels with it. This is the real selling point. IRM protection is applied at the library level or list level for all documents that are stored inside that document library or list or attached to items of that list. There's no IRM protection on a single file. You have to do it on the library or list level. To use IRM with PDF files, you need a specific PDF reader that supports RMS. Adobe Reader currently does not support it. Any file type can be protected by the RMS sharing app, and you can use the RMS logs for auditing purposes. Here are a few useful links about RMS. These are all official Microsoft links, but you can find a lot of good information in blogs too. Okay. So thank you for attending this webinar. Feel free to ask any questions you might have or just shoot me an email. My contacts are on the slide.
Thank you, Andre, for a very informative presentation. We have a few questions coming in right now, so I'll start off with this one. Are screenshots possible on protected documents where I have read permissions only?
No. It depends. So if you're using, for instance, an Office client application such as Word or Excel, you can, and you're using Windows, the screenshot will be blocked, so you cannot screenshot it. But you cannot, if you use some third-party screen capture tool, you might be able to do it anyway. So that depends on the tool you're using. If you're just using Office, you cannot. You can protect it. Yeah, so it will not be allowed.
Okay. Another question here. GigaTrust desktop client can now support Adobe PDF. What's your position on this?
Sorry, I didn't understand the question. Could you just read it again?
GigaTrust desktop client can now support Adobe PDF. What is your position on this?
So it's another way to do it, to open protected PDFs. You can use. I guess in my presentation I have it there on the applications, the support applications. I think it's there. Let me just look into it just real quick. Yeah, GigaTrust, NitroDesk. There's a bunch of them that support it now. So just Adobe Reader does not. But other than that, yeah. So it's my position is use whatever you have that allows you to open protected PDF files. You just don't have to use Foxit or any other one. If GigaTrust is the one you have, then just feel free to use it. It works.
Okay, perfect. We have another question here. I would like to know what happens with IRM with Office applications older than 2010.
So if you're using a map, it's not supported before Office 2010. If you have Office 2007, you can use with Active Directory RMS. So you have to use an on-premises solution for that. So you can't use SharePoint Online, but you can use Office 2007 if you use AD RMS.
Okay. We have a few people asking, will the video be available afterwards? So just to let you know, the recording will be available to all attendees. And we have time for one final question, Andre. So IRM in SharePoint Server and SharePoint Foundation, both on-premise, are exactly the same? Question mark. Are there any limitations in Foundation?
As for the IRM settings themselves, no, it's the same. Of course, if you have Foundation, you might not have, for instance, the Office web apps, and you lose some of the features I was showing. But as for the IRM infrastructure, so what allows you to encrypt the files and decrypt the files, it's the same, yes.
Okay. That's all the time we have for questions. So thanks again, Andre, for taking the time today to explain IRM to the audience. And thanks to you for attending, everyone. So before we go, thank you, Andre. For more top quality training from the world's best speakers, look no further than Stockholm for European SharePoint Conference 2015. You can currently avail of the fantastic super early bird offer and get a 3-day pass for the superb price of $9.95. Check SharePointEurope.com for more information, but don't delay as this offer ends April 17th. So thank you all again for joining us today, and next up in our webinar series we'll be joined by Paul Swider on April 22nd, who will be talking about extending Office 365 business solutions using Cortana, Siri and Google Now. To register and find out more about this webinar, go to bit.ly/pswider. Goodbye for now, and I hope to see you all soon. This webinar is now ended.